Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into how businesses figure out who their customers are, and maybe more importantly, how they launch products that actually, resonate.
That's right. We're looking at two big ideas from our source material today. First, these things called customer personas, really understanding who you're building for.
And second, how products actually come to life. The whole journey from just an idea to something people use, specifically looking at concepts like the minimum viable product or MVP.
hmm And maybe even beyond that, our mission here is to sort of cut through the noise and give you the core takeaways on these crucial strategies. So you get the essentials on identifying your audience and launching smartly.
Okay, let's dive right into those personas then. We hear know your customer all the time, but what does that actually mean in practice? What are customer personas really?
Well, think of them as detailed, kind of semi-fictional profiles of your ideal customers. They're meant to represent a significant chunk, maybe say 80% of your potential business.
So like a character sketch?
Exactly. But based on real data and research, it's not just guesswork. And it's key to distinguish, are we talking B2B, where you have a
Yeah.
buyer persona, or B2C, where it's more of a consumer persona? The motivations can be quite different.
Right. And you mentioned data. What kind of details are we talking about? Is it just demographics, like age and location?
Oh, it goes way beyond that. Demographics are a starting point, sure,
Yeah.
age, location, maybe job title, but the real value comes from digging deeper
Deeper how?
into their goals, their wants, their challenges, their pain points. What keeps them up at night? What are they trying to achieve? Even things like their interests, their hobbies, where they hang out online,
Yeah.
their social media
Okay,
habits.
so it's about understanding their whole world almost.
Precisely. And what's really interesting from our sources is the idea that you shouldn't just create personas for your current happy customers.
Ah, okay. So who else? Potential customer.
Yes, potential or targeted ones, definitely.
Yeah.
But also, and this is often overlooked, personas for your non-customers,
Yeah.
people who aren't buying from you.
Non-customers? Why would you spend time profiling people who don't buy your stuff? That sounds a bit counterintuitive.
It does at first glance, maybe. But understanding why they aren't buying can be incredibly revealing. Our sources had this really concrete example from Zara.
Oh, yeah, I remember reading that. They contrasted two types, right?
Exactly. On one hand, you have stylish Sandra. She's maybe a professional, lives in the city, she's fashion forward, buys clothes regularly to update her look. She's the core customer.
Right. Makes sense.
But then they profiled throwaway Teresa. This persona represents someone who doesn't typically shop at Zara. Maybe she's younger, under 20, or older, say over 40,
Okay.
and her needs are totally different. She might only buy very functional, basic casual wear, or maybe outfits just for a specific party, something she'll wear only a few times. Price is likely a huge factor for her.
So what's the point of understanding throwaway Teresa if she's not your target?
Well, analyzing why Teresa isn't your customer can highlight potential market gaps, or it can reinforce why your current strategy works for Sandra. Sometimes, understanding who you're not serving helps you focus better on who you are serving.
Okay. That makes sense.
And it connects to this other powerful concept our sources brought up, the blue ocean non-customer tiers. It's a framework for thinking about different types of non-customers.
Blue ocean tears. Okay, tell me more.
Yeah, it's pretty insightful. There are three tiers. Tier one is the soon-to-be non-customers. These are people right on the edge of your market. They might be using a competitor minimally, or they're aware of you but haven't quite jumped in yet. They're the easiest to potentially convert.
Okay, the low-hanging fruit, maybe?
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
Then you have tier two, the refusing non-customers. These are people who have consciously considered your industry or products like yours and have actively decided against them. Maybe it's too expensive, too complicated, or doesn't align with their values.
So they've made a choice. Nope, not for me.
Exactly. Understanding their objections is crucial. Maybe there's a fundamental flaw or perception issue you need to address if you ever want to reach them.
And the third tier.
Tier three is the unexplored non-customers. These are people in distant markets, maybe people who have never even thought about solutions like yours, perhaps because they seem totally irrelevant or inaccessible.
Hmm. So really far out there.
Yeah, potentially. But identifying these unexplored needs could lead to creating entirely new markets or radically innovating your offering. Think about Cirque du Soleil appealing to adults who'd never go to a traditional circus. That's tapping into unexplored non-customers.
Wow. Okay. So studying non-customers isn't just about avoiding them. It's actually a source of major strategic insight, potentially even innovation.
Absolutely. It forces you to look beyond your current assumptions and see the bigger picture.
All right. So let's say you've done your homework, you've got your personas, you even understand your non-customers. Now you have an idea for a product or a feature. How do you actually, bring it into the world without risking everything?
Right. And that's where the second big concept comes in. The minimum viable product, or MVP.
The MVP. We hear this term thrown around constantly, especially in tech. What's the core idea, according to our sources?
Well, the term itself was apparently coined by Frank Robinson, but it really gained traction thanks to Steve Blank and Eric Ries, from the lean startup movement.
Oh, lean startup, right?
And the fundamental idea isn't just about building something cheap or fast, though that can be part of it. It's really about maximizing learning while minimizing wasted effort.
Learning, so it's an experiment.
Precisely. An MVP is the version of a new product which allows a team to collect the maximum amount of validated learning about customers with the least effort. It should have just enough features to be usable by early adopters and, crucially, to provide feedback for future development.
So it might be pretty basic, maybe even a bit clunky.
It could be. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is to test your core hypothesis. Does anyone actually want this thing? Does it solve a real problem? As Eric Ries famously put it, the idea is to remove any feature, process, or effort that does not contribute directly to the learning you seek.
Okay, that makes sense. Get something out there, see if it sticks, learn, and then iterate. Avoid building something nobody wants.
Exactly. It's about accelerating that build, measure, learn feedback loop. Assess demand, learn faster, don't waste resources building features nobody cares about, get to market quicker, maybe even gain a competitive edge by being first, even if it's basic.
But the conversation seems to have moved on a bit from just MVPs, hasn't it? Our sources mention other terms too.
Yes, absolutely. The landscape has evolved. While the MVP is still fundamental for that initial learning, we're now also talking about the MMP and the MLP.
MMP and MLP. Okay, break those down for us.
So MMP stands for Minimum Marketable Product. This is a step beyond the MVP. It's still minimal, but it has enough features and polish that you can actually market and sell it. It delivers recognizable value to the customer.
So MVP is for learning, MMP is for selling.
Roughly, yes.
Yeah.
The MVP validates the core idea. The MMP validates that people will actually pay for a version of that idea and that you can position it in the market.
Okay, and then MLP, minimum lovable product. That sounds nicer.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And that's the point. The
Yeah.
MLP takes it another step further. It's not just about viability or marketability. It's about creating something that early adopters will actually love.
Love. That's a high bar for a minimal product.
It is, but it's increasingly important, especially in crowded markets. The
Yeah.
MLP focuses not just on function, but on the user experience,
Yeah.
the design, the little details that create an emotional connection and make users say, wow, I really like using this.
Ah, so it's about building fans, not just users.
Exactly. Think about it. The MVP checks if you should build the product. The MMP checks if you can promote the product. But the MLP aims to get that crucial early following, those passionate advocates. It focuses on creating a lovable customer experience right from the start, even if it's simple.
Why is that lovable aspect so important now?
Because often, viable just isn't enough anymore. There are so many alternatives for almost everything. If your product is just functional, just barely viable, it's easy for customers to switch when something slightly better or maybe just more pleasant to use comes along.
So the MLP is about building loyalty and competitive advantage through delight, even early on.
That's the idea. It's about focusing on the core features that deliver the most value and the most positive emotional response. It recognizes that user experience and emotional connection are key drivers of adoption and retention today.
Okay, wow. So pulling this all together then, what's the big takeaway from this deep dive?
Well, I think it really highlights that building successful products isn't some mystical art. It starts with a really deep, almost empathetic understanding of your audience, including those non-customers, through tools like personas.
Right. Know who you're building for inside and out.
Exactly. And then it's about adopting a smart, iterative approach to actually building and launching. Moving perhaps from that initial, is this even viable, MVP stage?
Towards something that's not just functional or marketable, but ideally something your early users genuinely find, well, lovable.
Precisely. It frames product development as this continuous cycle. You learn, you adapt, you refine, always aiming not just to meet needs, but to actually delight your customers. It's
Mhm.
about understanding what they need, yes, but also figuring out what they'll truly love.
It shifts the focus from just features to the overall experience and connection.
It really does. And that connection, that lovability can be a powerful differentiator.
So here's something to think about as you go through your day. What if you tried sketching out a persona, not for your ideal customer, but for someone who actively avoids products or services like yours, a refusing non-customer? What could you learn?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Or look at the tools you use every single day, your phone apps, your work software, maybe even your coffee maker. What would need to change to make them not just viable or functional, but truly lovable? What does lovable even mean in that context?
Yeah, thinking about that personal experience really brings the MLP concept home, doesn't it?
Definitely food for thought. That's all the time we have for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.